morning and welcome to SouthCrest for our summer series Minor League. At this time, I would like to introduce our starting lineup. For the home team, we have at pitcher number 3, Amos. At catcher number 5, Micah. On first base number 4, Obadiah. Starting on second base number 9, Haggai. Third base number 6, Nahum. Our shortstop today is number 1, Hosea. Playing left field, number 2, Joel. The center fielder, number 11, Malachi. At right field, number 10, Zechariah. Our designated hitter for today is number 8, Zephaniah, and in the bullpen we have number 7, Habakkuk. Let's play ball.
So this morning we are kicking off a brand new series called Minor Leagues. Now, in this series, we're going to dig into all of those small books at the end of the Old Testament, right? And I would say we need to remember those books, but that would imply that people have actually read those books of the Bible. And I think if we're being honest, many of us don't even look at those. We skip over them. One, they got weird names, and two, they're all about prophecy, right? They're prophesying for the people of Israel. And when it comes to prophecy in the Bible, usually we're not big fans of that because it's hard to understand. And then most of these minor prophets in particular are writing about the nation of Israel, and all this stuff has already happened. So we're kind of like, well, that has no bearing on my life today. So why would I spend time learning about the minor prophets? But I would submit to you this morning that as we walk through these, we will see a lot in those books that apply to what you and I are going through each and every day. Now, when I was growing up in elementary school, there was a favorite part of my day at school, right? And that was recess. I mean, lunch is good, but recess is gooder. You know, I mean, we had a lot of fun at recess. And one of the reasons we had fun at recess, I grew up north, is it was always changing. Like when you went out that day for recess, it may have snowed, it may not have snowed. I don't know how many of you have ever rolled a snowball larger than you, where you had to have like 4 or 5 people pushing with you, all who are about that big. And so the snowball was probably that big, but man, it felt like it was that big, you know? And we would roll them to build a giant snowman. Problem is, when you run roll snowball that big, the next one has to be slightly smaller. You have to pick it up and put it on top of the first one. Well, when it's taller than you are, and it probably weighs close to 300 to 400 pounds, it's not really going up in the air. So all across our schoolyard, we just had large snowballs because that's all we could do. We just roll big snowballs. But usually at recess, things ended up falling into a competitive sport of some kind. We would all get together and be like, let's play basketball, let's play football, let's play other games that our teachers would say those are too violent, but hey, we would try to play them anyway, right? And so when you're playing a competition sport with teams, you have the joy of picking teams, right? Now, 2 unfortunate souls would be chosen to be captains. And their job was to select from amongst the crowd their teams, right? And so you would take turns picking your teams. Now, that seems pretty simple, but it's really more complicated than that, right? Because you have a large group of people in front of you. And so every once in a while, I would get chosen to be a captain. I had my strategy, right? The very first thing I would do was like, hey, here's a sport we're playing. Who's the best player at that sport? And I would begin trying to pick off all of those. Well, after about 4 or 5 people, you get rid of the best, and now you're just into the okays, right? They're decent at that sport. And so you begin to cipher through those, and then you have those that are even less fortunate than the captains, who are the people who always get picked last. Because no matter what sport you're playing, they're just awful, okay? And they always got picked last. Now, one of my good friends was that guy. He was a guy who was really cool, but he was terrible at sports. Like, he had no athletic bones in his body whatsoever, but he always wanted to play with us. And so when I was captain, I would go through my strategy. I would pick the best players in that sport. And then when we got into the OKs, I would feel bad for my friend. I was super competitive, but every once in a while, this weird thing called a soft side would come out in me. I don't know what that was all about. And I would end up picking my friend so he wouldn't be last. So he wouldn't be, again, the last one picked. Now, that was much to the chagrin of everybody who I'd already picked. They're like, dude, why are you picking him? He's awful. And I'd always find myself saying something like this. Yeah, I know, but maybe this time he won't mess up. Every time I was wrong because he always messed up, you know, but I would continue to choose him and pick him because I thought maybe this time, right? But really because it wasn't about the competition, it was about my friendship. It was about, I didn't want him to be chosen last again. And so while I could do something about it, I would. Have any of you ever found yourself in a similar situation? Maybe it was picking teams, or maybe it was in a job scenario where you really, really like somebody and your like for that person gets in your way of your better judgment, that they really can't do that job or they're not qualified to do that. But you keep giving them chance after chance after chance, hoping one day they'll get their act together and actually do what you asked them to do. And so that's what we're going to find today in the story of this prophet that we're looking at, this minor prophet we're looking at today. We're going to find this idea to give us a chance over and over again, even when we don't deserve it. Because we're going to see that's what God does with us every single day. So we're going to be taking a look at our first minor leaguer for this summer, and his name is Hosea. Now, Hosea was a son of Beri, and he lived in Israel during what they call the golden age of Israel, which was with Jeroboam II as king. Now, Hosea was a very common name in ancient Israel, and it's derived from the Hebrew word meaning salvation. It means help or deliverance. And the name Jesus that we use in the New Testament is actually a derivative of that word Hosea. It's another name of it. And so Jesus has that same sense of help, deliverance, and salvation. Now, Hosea was a prophet during the 8th century BC there. And with the possible exception of Jonah, he was the only writing prophet that we know who lived in the northern kingdom of Israel. Now, if you are aware or not aware, when David was king of Israel, there were 12 tribes. That's what Moses took out of Egypt. There were 12 tribes, and they were all together. Solomon took over after David. Solomon started off really good track, made some really dumb choices, and God said, hey, after you die, I'm taking the kingdom from your son and dividing it. And so what happened was a guy who they had kicked out during Solomon's reign came back, fought with Solomon's son. He created an empire, a kingdom to the north with 10 of the tribes of Israel, and it was called Israel. And it was in the north. The southern tribe was called Judah. It had 2 tribes, but Jerusalem was in Judah. Okay, and so you have this separation of the country. Now, when you read through the books of Chronicles and Kings, you will find out that every king who ever reigned in Israel made God mad, was not seeking after God. In Judah, they were like 50-50. They'd have a good king, they'd have a bad king. They'd have a good king, they'd have a bad king. But they lasted a bit longer than Israel. So this is where this is happening. This prophecy is taking place in the northern kingdom of Israel, and this is during their golden era. They were enjoying peace politically and militarily at that time in Israel. As a matter of fact, they were at the cutting edge of all that was new. They had all the wealth. They had all these people coming in, bringing new information and new knowledge. They were really doing well from a worldly standpoint. But morally, they were bankrupt. When it came to following God and doing what God said, they were so far off the mark. And so enters Hosea. We see in Hosea chapter 1, verse 2, it says this. The Lord said to him, Hosea, go and marry a woman who will be unfaithful to you. She will give you children whose fathers are other men. Do this because people in this country have acted like an unfaithful wife to the Lord. So God ordered Hosea to go marry an unfaithful woman. And her name was Gomer, which, by the way, is an awesome name. Right? If you're looking at, or if anybody you know is pregnant, they're looking for a name for a child, Gomer should be right up there. I mean, the Bible's full of them. Dorcas, Gomer, there's all kinds of good names in the Bible you can use, right? Don't use that name. Okay, really, don't use it. But that's an idea, right? Now, some of you may be following along in your own Bibles, and as I was reading that first verse, you might have seen a different word than unfaithful in your translation. So let me address that real quickly. I am using this morning, instead of the ESV, I'm using the International Christian Children's Bible, okay? And I'm using it for 2 reasons. One, we have a wide age range within this room, and so I want to keep it Disney Channel friendly. All right, I want to keep it PG level. But there's a bigger and more important reason I chose to use that translation. Because that translation uses the word unfaithful. Now, If you're looking in your translations, you're going to see a couple words. They all mean the same thing. And all of those words apply to one very important aspect of sin. And my fear this morning is if I were to use that word, other than having a few parents complain to me about the language I use, but your minds would go to that sin, which is what God wants and what God was trying to show. But I think at the heart of that sin is a deeper problem that people have, and that is unfaithfulness towards God. And here's why I don't want you to make the mistake of this morning. I don't want you to hear this story of Hosea and think Hosea's issues with this sin, I don't struggle with that sin, so this doesn't apply to me. No, you are unfaithful people to God. I am an unfaithful person to God. And so when we use the word unfaithful, we can't hide behind, well, that doesn't apply to me. No, this is an all-encompassing umbrella that applies to everybody. And so I love the word unfaithful because that is what the heart is all about. Because I promise you, the person who's the word in your Bible is unfaithful. But we're also unfaithful in so many other ways. So continuing on in Hosea, it says this. So Hosea married Gomer, daughter of Diblaim. Gomer became pregnant and gave birth to Hosea's son. The Lord said to Hosea, name him Jezreel. This is because soon I will punish the family of Jehu for the people they killed at Jezreel. Then I'll put an end to the kingdom of Israel. And I will also break the power of Israel's army in the valley of Jezreel. Gomer became pregnant again and gave birth to a daughter. The Lord said to Hosea, name her Lo-Ruhamah. This is because I will not pity Israel anymore. I will no longer forgive them. But I will show pity to the people of Judah. I will save them. I will not use bows or swords, horses or horsemen, or weapons of war to save them. I, the Lord their God, will save them. After Gomer had finished nursing Lo-Ruhamah, she became pregnant again, and she gave birth to another son. The Lord said, name him Lo-Ammi, because you are not my people, and I am not your God. So altogether, Hosea and Gomer raised 3 kids, though it's not very clear that all of these were Hosea's kids. We know the first one was, but after that, who knows? And, you know, the cool thing about this story is that Gomer had an awesome name, and they decided to keep the awesome name theme going for these kids as well. I mean, the oldest son's name was Jezreel. And Jezreel was a place that Jehu was a general in the Israel army, and God used Jezreel to punish one of the kings and to slaughter them. All right? Problem is, Jehu took it a bit too far and killed way too many people, and God was mad at him for that. And so he's going to punish Israel, but he's also going to the valley of Jezreel where Jehu committed all these crimes, and he's going to destroy Israel's army there. So your name gets to be, hey, everybody's going to hate you later because you were named after the place where we lost our country, where we were defeated. Awesome. The second born daughter was named Lo-Ruhamah, which literally means no mercy. Because God will no longer have mercy on Israel. Now you said, for Judah, the southern kingdom, I'm going to give them mercy. Just in case you don't know, Israel was conquered by Assyria about 70 years, 80 years before Judah was finally conquered by Babylon. And so there's this gap where Israel's gone into exile and Judah's still a kingdom. So he showed mercy to them longer than he showed for Israel. And the third child, who got the most stellar name of all of them, Lo-Ammi, name simply means not my people. If you know anything about the Old Testament, God called the people of Israel and said, you are my people. You are my chosen race. You are who I have set apart. And now he's so mad at them, he's saying, your new name is not my people. I'm no longer your God. Because of your unfaithfulness, you are not my people, and I'm not your God. You see, Hosea's marriage and family were about a living example of the prophecy that he was giving to the people of that time. Hosea is one of the longer minor prophets. And if you were to read through the prophecies later in his book, you will find them all tied to the way his family was raised, to the unfaithfulness of his wife, to the names of his kids. It's just a walking example of what he is saying every single day. Gomer's repeated unfaithfulness and Hosea's continued faithfulness to her paralleled Israel's poor choices not seeming true to God, but God always being there for them. And that's what we're going to see as we walk through this. So as we look at this book, and we've read all this about his family, like you're thinking, this is awesome, but what does this have to do with me? Right? Like, what does something that happened in Israel thousands and thousands of years ago have any relation on my body? I mean, for some of you, it's in the Old Testament. You don't hang out there. You're like, I like the New Testament. I don't like the Old Testament. Well, a couple things on that. First, what did Jesus teach out of? The Old Testament. And I've always said, if it's good enough for Jesus, then it's good enough for me. So I'm going to read the Old Testament because Jesus taught out of the Old Testament. But the other thing is there's a huge story that God's writing. It is his story. His story is simply God's story. And he's building and developing and creating something that matters. And if it matters, then we need to spend some time looking at it. And so as we look at this story and try to understand how it applies to us, the first thing we have to do with any story in the Bible is realize what's being said. I got some bad news for you today. Church, we are not Hosea. That's God. That means, church, there's only one character left that we get to be, and that's Gomer, the unfaithful. As we read this story today, this is the application to our lives. This is where we fall. Now, before you get upset, and before you get up mean and mad at me because I said that you weren't a perfect person, let me say it a little bit more clearly. You are not a perfect person. You sin and are unfaithful to God, okay? So stop thinking you're Hosea the faithful. We are Gomers, all right? We make mistakes, a lot of them. But the good news of this story that we want to pull out today is that God is faithful. When we're not, he is. And on top of that, not only is he faithful, but he loves us. And because of that love, there are things that we can find in this book of Hosea that God is going to do out of his love, even though of the unfaithfulness of his people, of his unfaithfulness of us, that he's going to provide. We see three things here later in the book of Hosea. The first is this: God pursues us tenderly. In Hosea 2:14, we see this. So I'm going to attract her. I will lead her into the desert and speak tenderly to her. Remember, this is an image of Hosea and Gomer, a husband and wife. And God is saying, hey, I'm going to go back after Israel. I'm going to go back after my unfaithful people, and I'm going to attract them tenderly. We've all fallen short of the glory of God. We see that in Romans. No matter how hard we try, we fail again and again and again and again. We place things or people in our lives as more important than God. We decide that our will is better than God's will, that our way is better than God's way. And at times, if we're being honest, we can find scripture and all of his rules a kind of oppressive and annoying. Because we want to do something different, and if it wasn't for that whole Bible thing getting in our way, we'd be having a lot of fun right now. And by the way, the only people who say that are people who read the Bible, because if you don't read the Bible, you don't know what's in there to be oppressive and annoying to you, so you don't worry about it. So just kind of put this in a chain of reference. The people who get most annoyed with God's rules are the people who call themselves gods. Because we're the only ones who know his rules. We find ourselves in these situations. But in spite of all that, God has not cast us off. He promises to take us alone, take us away from distractions, take us away from the world and all that it has to offer. Because he wants to be alone with us. Why? To speak tenderly to us, to call us back to himself. Literally, the Hebrew says here, so that he can speak to our hearts. And when he speaks, he'll be gentle. Listen, he is not taking us there to beat us down. Romans 8 says, therefore there is now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. I'm not here to point out all your flaws. You know them. You're guilty over them. You can't sleep at night because of them. I'm not here to point out how bad you are. I'm here to remind you of how good I am and how much I love you. Max Lucado says this: our Savior kneels down and gazes upon the darkest acts of our lives. But rather than recoil in horror, he reaches out in kindness and says, I can clean that if you want. And from the basin of his grace, he scoops a palmful of mercy and washes our sin. You see, that's the meaning of what's happening here. He's showing us mercy. One of the kids' names was I have no more mercy for you. But he's going to put that back by talking to us tenderly and gently. The second thing we see God going to do here in Hosea is God promises hope and safety. Hosea 2:15, we see this. Then I will give her back her vineyards, and I will make the valley of Achor a door of hope. And you're like, great. I love it when the valley of Achor becomes a door of hope. You don't have to show hands, but how many of you actually know what the valley of Achor is, or exactly? Okay, little history lesson once again. So Moses, brought people out of Israel, and he hit a rock, got mad, hit a rock. God was like, that's not cool. And so you're not going to the promised land. But Joshua, your boy Joshua's going to take him in. First thing they have to do when they cross over the Jordan to get to the promised land is this mighty fortress called Jericho. Most of you have heard this story. Jericho is this mighty fortress. Like, how are we going to defeat this? And we're going to walk around the city. That's how we're going to do this. We're going to walk around the city for 7 days. But on the seventh day, we're going to walk around it 7 times. The whole time, people were throwing slushies at him. No, sorry, that was VeggieTales version. Anyway, but the whole time, they're getting ridiculed and mocked by people, all right? But on the 7th time around, they let go of the trumpets. Everybody starts cheering. The wall is called tumbling down. This is the mightiest fortress in the land. They defeated it without even raising a sword. But there was a command by God. Destroy it all. Burn it all. People, animals, gold, any kind of treasure, destroy it all. There was this dude. His name was Achan. He thought God's rules were oppressive because there's all this nice money sitting right here. And no one was watching. And Achan's like, hey, I'm just going to grab some of that, put it in my back pocket, go hide in my tent. No one knows, no one's hurt, no harm, no foul, right? Very next battle Israel goes to face is this small town of Ai. Okay, they didn't even have a traffic light in Ai, all right? It's just like in the boondocks, right? And Joshua says, I'm not even taking the whole army because there's only 100 couple people live here. I mean, no big deal. They march out against Ai and they get their butts whooped. They come running back with their tail between their legs. And they're like, what just happened? We took out the largest fortress in the land without raising a sword, and we go to Boondockville and we get our butts whooped. And God said, hey, there's sin in the camp. So in the valley of Achor, where they were camped, is this place of defeat because Achan had taken something away. Just so you know the rest of the story, they find out it was Achan, and the earth opens up and swallows him and his family and all this stuff up, and he's dead. But that's this valley of Achor. And God says, I'm going to take you back to the place of your defeat. I'm going to take you back to the place where you screwed up royally, where you messed up, where you were unfaithful to me. And I'm going to make that a garden. I'm going to make it a place of hope. I'm going to take your worst areas of life and make them some of your best. We're going to revisit that place. If you read on in that chapter 2, you see more detail. In verse 18, it says, at that time, I will make an agreement for them. I will be with the wild animals, the birds, and the crawling things. I will remove from the land the bow and the sword and the weapons of war. Then my people will live in safety. So look at, he's not going to only make you a garden. He's going to make you a garden and take away all the cicadas, all the mosquitoes, all right, all the bears and lions and tigers, oh my. Anything that can harm you, he's going to take that away. And if he doesn't take it away, he's going to make them docile where they just hang out with you. And then he's going to make sure no one ever comes in and attacks you again. There'll be no weaponry there. It'll be a place of peace and safety and hope. That's what he says he's going to do. That he's going to give us hope and safety. Now, the third and final thing we see from Hosea that God is going to do for us because of this love for us and his faithfulness is this. God redeems us and makes us pure. Hosea 2:19-20. This is out of the ESV, by the way. He goes, I now will betroth you to me forever. I will betroth you to me in righteousness and in justice and steadfast love and in mercy. I will betroth you to me in faithfulness, and you shall know the Lord. 3 times, I will betroth you. I will betroth you. I will betroth you. God is saying this. I'm going to take you back to a time before you were who you are today. I'm going to take you back to a time when you were not unfaithful. And I'm going to restore you to that point. And even though you've sinned, and even though you've done bad against me, I'm going to make you pure again. I'm going to wipe that all away. It's a do-over again and again and again, right? Jonah, everybody loves Jonah because he's the God of second chances. But then Peter asks later, like, how many times are we supposed to forgive? 7 times? Like, hey, you did twice with Jonah, 7. I'm being generous here. And Jesus said what? No, 70 times 7. He's a God who continues to restore, continues to build back up, continues to put us back into a good standing with him. There's not only going to be good in this paradise, but things will be right between us and God. He's restoring us. He's redeeming us. This has always been the way that God interacts with us. But now we will reciprocate that back to God. So how do we relate to God? Do you view him today as a distant master or just like this, he's God, so that's like he's in his own category? Or do you love him like a husband? Now, I just made some dudes in here squirm, okay? Because they're like, I don't love men. I don't love husbands. Okay, I get it, right? But here's the thing. In the Bible, it says that Jesus is the groom and that the church is the bride. Hey, church, guess what we are? The bride, okay? Some of you feel very demasculated this morning because I've called you a gomer and a bride. But hey, that's how this is relating together today. Here's the biggest thing. Do you love God that way? Do you love God on an intimate level? Not just the idea of who he is, but because you know him. But because you've connected to him. But because you've seen what he's done in your life, you've seen how he's sacrificed for you, and you want to make sure you do good for him. Not to earn anything, but out of a show of thankfulness. Is that how you're rolling this morning? Because that's the way that he loves us and gave himself for us. So there's this story. This little boy one day decided he wanted to build a sailboat. So he started getting together some supplies at home. He spent months building this toy sailboat. He carved it out himself. He put tar and pitch on it to make sure it was seaworthy. He built a sail for it. He built a little cabin. He wanted it to look like a real sailboat. Spent hours a day, intricate details, building this sailboat. Because here's the thing. I don't only want it to work, but I want it to look good. I want people to see me like, that is awesome. And so one day he finishes building this sailboat. And the moment of truth has arrived. So he takes it to the lake and he places his sailboat in the lake and it floats. He's excited, and then a light breeze wisps up and it fills the sails and it begins to ripple through the water and sail. The boy's excitement, though, soon turns to horror as he realizes the wind is pushing it away from the shore. He jumps into the lake and runs after the boat, but it's gone too far and is too deep and he can't get it. He walks back up on shore, watching his boat get smaller and smaller in the distance. He stays there hoping maybe the winds will change and maybe it'll blow it to shore and I can go and retrieve my boat. But it doesn't. The boat just sails out of sight. Heartbroken, destroyed, the boy goes home sobbing. His mother sees him when he enters the house. She says, oh no, did the boat not work? And the boy goes, no, the other. The boat worked too well. It's gone. A couple months later, they were in town doing some shopping, and they passed this secondhand store, and in the window is his boat. He runs into the shop, yells at the owner, that's my boat, that's my boat. He goes and he grabs the boat out of the window, but the owner stops him and is like, hey, you're gonna have to pay for that. The boy goes, no, it's mine, I built it. And the boy begins to go into detail about this boat. He begins to point out chisel marks and file marks that only the builder would know were there. And the owner was like, hey, that's great and all, but I bought that boat from someone. And if you want that boat, you're gonna have to buy it from me. The boy goes home again, sad but not devastated. He begins to walk to his neighbors asking, hey, can I earn money some way? Can I do jobs for you? He begins to work and work and work, making money to save up to buy back his boat. And then one day he has enough. And he goes back to that shop, to that store owner. And he says, I have the money to buy the boat. And so he buys back the boat. Leaving that shop, he's hugging that boat, holding it tightly. He says, you are my boat, because you're mine twice. First, because I made you. Second, because I bought you back. See, that's how God is with us. No matter how unfaithful we are, no matter how far we set our sails to get away from him, he never stops pursuing after us. And when he gets us, he grabs us and says, you are mine twice. First, because I made you. And second, because I bought you at a price. And that price was his son Jesus on the cross. To redeem us, to restore us, to bring us back to him. And no matter how many times we are unfaithful to him, he never stops pursuing us. He never gives up on us. So that one day he just grabs us in his arms and says, you are mine.